Sheila here with Sirius Talisman. This is Soul Hour, Jupiter night. And the moon is applying to Spica. Now we got the moon out of the 22, sun is out of the 22. Everybody stop mass shooting. We had the moon 22ing with opposing Chiron 22ing with sun as a point of Thales, which basically means that we had a mass shooting in the Western Hemisphere, in Australia, and an assassination of a military general of Hamas. So religion, military, academia, shooting, Mars Jupiter, big argument, and again religion, shooting. The good thing about the fact that Mars squared Neptune is because Neptune also dissolves, and those could have been even bigger events. Now, Moon is out of the 22, Sol is out of the 22. It's only Chiron there, and both are leaving an aspect to Chiron. So we have some time before the next 22 chapter. I want to talk about something. And this is what prompted me to press record. The Coin Financials, talking about the Basel Accords. I'm midway into watching, and I want to talk about the Saturn Neptune in Aries. Because it has been 2 minutes before I talked about that. Why buying government bonds ends up bad? Now, here's the thing. The financial coins talk about the bank buying government bonds. What people might be more or less aware of is that their savings are bonds. After the subprime crisis, when there was an influx of debt, a deflation in housing first independent of ability to work, let alone believing the patient, then a lot of people got into debt. And when they were prescribed pills for the depression, what happened? The government chose the bear. And it was a bipolar one, because SSRIs create manic depression. And that big boom basically meant that the people that were drugged into psychosis were the government bonds. Now, let me explain that in a little bit more detail, because that's your 401k, that's your so much as your Bolicol is, okay, because this is the insurance that is supposed to provide for medicine. But before we talk about medicine, when we talk about the working sector, what would get people into the subprime crisis? And it's not just the prime, it's not just the interest. It's the very reason that they needed to take a loan, whether it's to buy a house. Now, our working sector is not designed for sovereign people. Lack of sovereignty creates physical and mental health issues. Um, the rituals around currency and wealth consolidation, which is also real estate, and this is one of the moves from one Basel Accords to another, um, is done with torturing infants and raping them to create both mind control slaves and harvest their energy so that they will later torture others and harvest their energy. And that, if that sounds like a pandemic of horror, yes, when we think about Tuvalu in the Indo-Pacific that has radiation in it suffice to hold 25,000 million years without suffice nutrition, it would not get people to have cancer from the food. That's a shit ton of trauma that went down there. A bomb bigger than Hiroshima. Um, so when it comes to government bonds, the reason that they're not yielding is because rehabilitation was never designed to be. Because to rehabilitate, let's say a person has even a physical ailment or a mental crisis, they were not designed to recover. To recover, they need sovereignty. What created the situation, particularly if it is work issue, and even some cases of accidents, some, was slavery by design. When I take the bus, almost every day I meet people, not even that old, that fell at least twice in the bus that goes from um, their home to the market. 2 meters. To be honest, I don't know how to solve this issue. Definitely driving slowlier. It would drive people crazy, but at least we'll not have elderly people falling twice. At least. Um, this is in Israel, so some of them you can take into account are Holocaust survivors. Mind you, this was a country that had, I think, AAA credit score up until recently. um, so what happens in practice, and when these people get sick, one maybe in 10 medicines does more good than harm. But sometimes, even if it does more good than harm, the harm that it does necessitates another medicine that balances. Now, the government investments, whether it's through welfare in countries where there is welfare, or infrastructure, or grants for entrepreneurs, basically sets by design, a bubble. People think that they're going to heal, they make this course, that course, and then corruption. Naturally, people that suffer are not so fit to the slavery structure. In fact, the people that get sick are more susceptible to the slavery structure. Um, as a holistic health practitioner, it's one of the most challenging things to explain people. I got so much just in my apprenticeship. I prescribed 1 day of traveling locally to a person that was overworked, and the entire earth and not only that, it wasn't a person I didn't know because it was just apprenticeship. So I knew that when that person travels for 1 day, and they knew it, they get better. So I said, you must have that in the schedule. Um, Long story short, I had to flee for some harvesting of energy witchcraft that person was involved with. I just think it would be better to travel, but now it's very difficult to explain to people that now usually when a doctor wants to scare a person, they will give them the end implication of lethality. If you will keep eating like that, that's what will happen. And then they try to adjust how to hold the tension and have creative ways or points of interference, as I call them. With that particular issue, it's very difficult to tell people, particularly in Israel, at least before 2023, because asur lashvot, we cannot compare. Um, Mark Rutte got yesterday a lot of slack because he compared. It is not, not even doing that as a Jew. So, not going to. So, if as a holistic health practitioner, I would tell people what the structure of that they are complying with is doing to them, they would say this is conspiracy theory, and then the gate closed, and Arbeit macht nicht frei. Now, I'm not being, I'm not talking from a position of superiority. I had to learn this myself. I nearly died. Not only that, I talk a lot about sexual sovereignty, but also self-love, because it requires good balance between rest and work, is something that's for the fiends. So I was looking at agrarian society and the fact that we can eat purslane and amaranth and basically they said that it has more proteins and magnesium and iron than other things. I don't know, I haven't tried. But that is basically considered invasive herbs or weeds that are feeding people through famine and cold winters. The chickpeas is cold winters as well. It does not make agrarian society needless. It just makes it normal, not slavery. People can raise their prices to normal food prices that account for all the labor behind them without people crying that they're starving because they would have the food that's actually nourishing and grows as invasive herb. It's called food sovereignty. Today I went to buy Altkasse, which is old cheese, and this is because if I get the actual product that is fair trade, I invest there, and even if it's luxury product, every once in a while I will buy that and then eat whatever grows. And in that way, everybody profits. Whereas in slavery, people lose their ability to work, and if people heard holistic healers that advocate against invasive herbs. There is not a single drop of medicine in that advice. The shit ton of basil accords. And that would mean that when our agrarian folks lose eventually their ability to work, there's no one to make them an actual self that solves, even in holistic healing. That's what happened when, by design, the market is not allowing people to have sovereignty. Not if they're hardworking, not if they're not hardworking, not if they're healthy, not if they're sick, definitely not if they're recovering. The scariest creature is the recovering person. I almost died, probably, I don't know how many times, because I dared to begin to recover. Now, and what happens when person recovers? So, let's talk about cases, study cases. Study case, subject A, works with children that are considered special education, special needs children. At home, they're the backbone of the house. At work, they're the backbone. Then their back breaks and they need to have a tummy surgery. 6 months, kaput. They could not receive help for their lives. Now they're forced to. And then they begin to learn how to set boundaries, which means they will have to address the issues. Where did they learn to act this sick way? And we don't blame the patient. We look at how, I call it internalization of the offenders. Whether it's upbringing, their parents worked like that, and so on and so forth, but also society that makes of people that do that in those conditions heroes, mythical, something, something, but they never get to be people. And so they don't get to feel like they can exist being a person that also rests, that also has boundaries, and so on and so forth. When they begin to be themselves, now nobody, they've changed. Some are happy for them in the beginning, then they have to change with them. It means that the children will have to prepare their own food every once in a while. It means that people will need to rethink the working conditions for people who work in education, definitely special needs education. It also means that they will need to be supported for a while. And then they're going to find out that it's not enough to buy at the grocery store, let alone to pay rent or mortgage. But the taxes, now all of that has to change. And then it begins to be issue that could be life risking. At that particular point, if a change doesn't happen, they could get across people that say, well, you can do something for me, and they pay you money. That something is hardly ever legal, and all of their efforts to rehabilitate can come to a halt if they take such offer. Which is why, for example, I didn't. That's the privilege of being a holistic health practitioner. I know from the get-go. Like if I couldn't do that at work, what makes somebody think that would be easier? Now, the government that's investing in their supposed recovery can never yield. You want another example? Every single business is like the government. The business can never yield because it is for one purpose and one purpose only. When a person opens a business, there are business expenses. Now, it's not a bad thing if the business can be profitable. But when there are business expenses, the business is in debt always, and this is how money gets laundered. Okay? Money is rent to open certain business. A legit registered business. Now there's this phenomenon called protection. Protection is very important. Why? Yes, that and that is missing in the accountants. Okay, why? Protection. What does the police do? Nothing. Oh, if the police do nothing and the money is missing, protection. Okay, that's just one possibility. Now, meanwhile, you have to pay your employees. Invest into the business. When we are taught as small businesses about due diligence, we learn the story of some business person that over-reported. Why? Because the next year they under-reported. And they mixed it with that and with that. I always find these things way too complicated. And they always fall flat at something. It's like extortion code. It's said to be exposed. Now it's end of the year. Everybody's doing due diligence. Now, all of those things are indirectly the bonds. Because business usually takes also what? A loan. And this is called government bonds. They are by design set so that people won't be able to return them. One time I saw in Israel advertisement, we give a grant as a loan for one business idea only. And if that business idea fails, never again we give that loan. PayPal was the seventh entrepreneur of its founders. All the previous one tanked, and I think all founders are doing quite well as business people and had a couple of successful endeavors. And you ask, Shirley, how did they cross their threshold? Don't ask me, ask a nice lady, ex-PVDA, named Trudy Verstegen. She'll tell you these are rituals where people steal life energy through ritual abuse. And they use also MK often, which is the occult for that purpose. Of course, these people also have been through such abuse, so but this is why they crossed the threshold. That's basically There was a billionaire that asked on their social media, what would you do if I offered you so and so and so million, billion? I said, keep it, take down the coat. um, it wasn't lack of greed. It was not about lack of greediness, but being business savvy. Because to be very honest, um, sexual sovereignty is also wealth. And when wealth is achieved through cohesion, embodiment, okay, honoring of the yes, no, and maybe, that really brings the water. Now, it's a big argument. Mars and Jupiter aspects are always big argument, big confrontation, but also uh, big ideas, um, big actions, and so on. So, what do you think is going to happen when the planet of due diligence, Saturn, and the planet of scams, Ponzi schemes, casting illusions, and dissolution of boundaries between the real and the dream meet in the planet of real estate that's going to be Mars and is going to be in Aquarius, which is the planet of, which is the sign of the water bearer. Architecture, space, global society, okay? Gemini is local society. Uranus, that's associated also with Aquarius when it crosses Gemini, gives us civil wars. Uranus rules rebellion. We call that bubble pop. And so it's not only the banks that are invested in government bonds or basically buying the government debt. Okay, there was a company called Dutch East India that started that, and they invested that into expedition. They loaned gold and they brought silver that they stole, and they lost more and more money until they lost all the money and they closed the bank that was supposed to be zero usury or 100% reserve. That was the Bank of Amsterdam. They had a separate book for the due diligence for those who are interested. How they got away with that? They doubled the lists. There's a hidden book. If that sounds like Neptune in Saturn, bookkeeping, one black, one red. Saturn rules black, Mars rules red. Saturn is also associated with lists, and Mars rules names. Neptune rules evasion, Saturn rules the boundary of being able to evade something. People with points on 0, 1, and 2 degrees. Aries, it's my Neptune return. Luckily for me, I don't have loans. But for people that's going to be quite challenging time. Neptune is also what is hidden. Saturn rules limitations, also courses. Um, and Mars rules something is not hidden. Okay, think about the mind control aspect of extortion cults, the dark occult aspect of extortion cults. Are no longer hidden. Are not hidden. So, with that, people are not the only ones invested in government bonds, but also banks. We had quite a recent one. Some Swiss bank, a couple of banks when Pluto ingressed into Aquarius. The rest of them are going to probably join them on Valentine's Day. Now, they may call it either the Red Valentine's Day or the Black Valentine's Day. So, or the Bordeaux, because that's the combination of the colors. It's um, now, do I have optimistic news? Yes, if you understand that all of this thing was created by violation of sexual sovereignty, energy harvesting, then you understand, first of all, what the core issue is. Anything that supports that drains energy from people, structures that drain energy from people, okay, is with the extortion cults. Anything that negates that is not with the extortion cults. Anything that uses good energy as bait, with the extortion cults. Anything that has good energy unconditionally, not with the extortion cults. We need to remember that the people in extortion cults, or the people that ran from extortion cults, were tortured. So we're not talking about blame here. Now, when people understand that them chronically not asking for more in life, or not asking for enough in life, or alternatively not honoring sexual sovereignty, whether their own or others. And what do I mean by that? People that were violated, they or the victims. Any other interpretation is make it one hand with the extortion codes. Okay, I remember there was this talk about one of the countries where the elders, the younger generations, didn't want to talk about the past of the comfort ladies in their countries because of the discomfort of the elders that were trafficking. It's not just comfort ladies, also men. That discomfort may end up with colonialism, because to colonize a place that's already trafficking its people way easier than a place where anybody that even so much as harasses is offender. Not as shame or blame, as that is a no. As society, okay, if you have, let's say you're Genghis Khan, 3 policies, 3 cities, or tribes or regions. One traffics the children. One traffics also only adults. They can't really traffic only adults. They traffic the children that ran away. One, you sent a spy, they gave a spy housing first, independent of ability to work, and believe their testimony. Now they know that that spy was raped, was called whore by their father, like Eliza, and the father can't contact with them. And that happened when they thought they're going to be of service to the nation. So they know what's the weak spot, as people don't have love there. Because if they knew what is an orgasm that is actually enjoyable for both who participate, they will never think that their child is a whore. You see, when you sex positive, when you study sex positive and willing consent, that's sexual sovereignty. That's reason. So which tribe is easier to invade? One tribe, they already know that the way that the espionage was sent exposed everything about, so they have to make sure that they're not invaded. One tribe traffics the children. One tribe, we haven't seen the children, but we saw traffics adults. We know that they cannot traffic adults because also the invaders traffic adults. That's how they created the special. It cannot without the children. They rape the children, then some children escape, And they try to traffic them as adults. That's so we know that one, they send the children because they wanted to appease to make peace. World consolidation. One, they traffic adults. Those that send the children to appease, they will extort money. Now, if the conquering tribe is smart, then they wouldn't have raped sexpionages to begin with. Since they're not smart, they'll take the children. And then they say, well, this child is 12. No, this child is 9. Oh, 9, no menstruation yet. No, no, no. 15 days later was the money. Everything was on tape. Don't believe me? Listen to the testimonies. Annika Lucas, Sven Cole, on Annika Lucas podcast. So, this is the point. If they were smart, they wouldn't rape anyone, definitely not for intelligence. Definitely not for sexpionages. Because then, if you have a person that's embodied and has sexual sovereignty, they sense, regardless of what's between the legs, they sense with clear sense, but with cohesion. If you do that with trauma, they develop hypervigilance. But what's lacking is the cohesion. So they are always going to give the truth in a frequency that's more susceptible to doom and gloom without points of interference. Okay, for example, I gave you prediction that looks like, oh my gosh, it's going to be a global impending doom. Doesn't have to be. And I gave the point of interference. Why? Because I value sexual sovereignty. Just the fact that I value that, just the fact that I stand for that, is already creating bigger cohesion. Now, if that supposedly tribe who comes to supposedly conquer was smart, would say, okay, but then somebody says, okay, we have so and so and so and so and so and so. This is what we have to offer. We need so and so and so and so and so and so. And that's called business. Without having anything by design collapsing. In another word, it is also called world peace. Now, what do we need to have world peace? We need for both those who come to do business and those that are the local to be what? Sexually sovereign. Because then those who come to do business come to do business. They don't come to do economic hitmanship because they don't live in trauma where their life energy was harvested as infants and all they knew how to get by was to harvest life energy. Now I need to listen to Annika Lucas today because maybe there are things that I didn't listen to her last interviews yet, So if there are things that are parallel, it's because I didn't listen yet. Um, and now we know, first of all, if we know what is the war about, if we understand that the biggest crookery in the world is not yielding half as much wealth as sexual sovereignty, embodiment, okay, human rights. People were taught to think about them as expenses because of trauma. It's the same reason when I gave that story of that lady, okay, that wasn't a trafficker at all, that worked in a special, with kids with special needs, and that was the backbone of her family. Then she fell flat. If somebody would tell her, take a break, she would say, nah, nah. But who will make dinner? Same reason to an exponent level of dumbfuckery. It's trauma, but it's also dumb. People think that they need to control other people. Yes, is usually because of some trauma. So that's the story of government bonds, or in Hebrew, agach, igrot chov, or I owe you. I don't owe you, but um, and this is why the design is okay by design, because if somebody heals, let's say, from sexual violence, they begin to what? Grow cohesion, remembrance. There's basically people like Annika Lucas and ritual abuse survivors that she interviews on her podcast recover, then they begin to connect the dots, and they have the best information. I listen to ritual abuse survivors before I listen to the news, because then I know what's happening. But that's true. If you invest in ritual abuse survivors recovering and having the right to exit violence, then you are at the blue ocean of blue oceans. When everybody is going to have bubbles that pop, you're going to have something that sustains, whether it's mental health, groundedness, more inner peace. Because you invest, first of all, why do they do these rituals to the children? To harvest what? Energy. What is the first thing that we invest? Energy. When we invest our energy in tending to the most needed to tend to topic on the planet, out of which everything is but a derivative, is the one thing that changes everything, and that's sexual sovereignty. The things that contribute to that, whether it's upbringing, whether it's meeting non-erotic needs before erotic needs, or whatever. If you ask yourself what's the one thing that changes everything, that's the one thing that changes everything. And when you get what happened there, and how do these people recover from that, this is where you get something that, when everything falls apart, that can sustain you more than the people that swept it under the rug, call it satanic panic, call it conspiracy theory. I had on YouTube a lady that taught how to boom on social media. As you can see, I haven't studied, but I listened to her, and she had a spouse, but the spouse also made business, made money, lost money. And she said, well, the issue is that my spouse learned the skill of making money. So even if he loses money, he learned the skill of making money. When we listen to ritual abuse survivors, we create foundation on a psychic level, on an emotional level, on a spiritual level. Okay? That every crisis that happens, it's not that we don't get shaken by that, or that we are, that's not what I'm talking about. But we know that all the things that they throw at us, whether it's false flags, whether it's emergency situations, all of these things, there's a foundation that knows what's happening. Doesn't mean that it's not shit for scary. This is why I said, listen to people. I know sometimes not easy listens, because these stories are horrid. However, if you ask yourself, before what crops to grow, because if the area is lasered, no crops grow. Before what food to stock, or where to get water, because with all that surveillance, tomorrow that water can be polluted. I had to live in an apartment where I stocked food, and the way that I had to live. The one resource is a sense of groundedness and knowing what is actually happening. Because if you go by the buses or by the trains, I think we learned where they end. If you listen to the instructions without thinking, more often than not, I think you know where it ends. But if you know that all the people that are involved in those crises, all of them, including all of them, were the children that no one came to save and weren't on the expandable level and didn't die in the rituals. And the reason they didn't die in the rituals is because they were set to hunt, harvest energy,